I'm just firming down the potting mix, the compost, in this little tray, and I've just sown some cabbage seeds. It's a type called Durham Early, and it is a spring cabbage, so we will be harvesting that next year in April, May. But doing this little task today has been so much easier thanks to this potting bench. I built it yesterday, and I used a wood pallet and a few planks from a second one, and it is a game changer because up until now at the new house, I've been doing all of my seed sowing and planting up, either sitting on the grass or inside at a table making an absolute mess. And so this is a good place for me to do this work. I'm outside, I can sweep the mess out, I can have my tray sitting here, and it's tall enough for me to stand and work at. Now, with wood being so expensive at the moment, it really does make sense to use wood pallets where we can. And so I'm going to show you how I built this so that you can build one of your own as well. The pallet potting bench is composed of a work surface, a lower surface, and I have pots and trays stored here, and then underneath I've put a tub, and it's filled with potting mix and vermiculite and other odds and ends. The height of it is waist height, so it's the same height as a kitchen counter. It's 90 centimeters. And the important thing as your first step is finding two pallets that are identical if you can. And if they're not identical, they should have very similar planks on the back side. And that is important because those planks on the back of the pallets are going to make up the legs. And pallets tend to only have 3 planks on the back, so that's 3 legs, and so that's why you need the second pallet. If your second pallet is not identical, it's still possible to use that pallet. First off, if you can find a pallet that has planks on the back with spacers that are the same distance apart, that's perfect. And that's what happened with me. My 2 pallets were not identical, but the spacers and the planks on the back were, so that was fine. And the space in between these spacers, and when I say spacers, I mean the blocks that create the pallet that space out the top and the bottom surface, they are 15 inches apart. So that's 38 centimeters. And it's important that they are the same distance because they are what the top and the lower surface sit on. So they give it stability and they give it that particular height. So if you remove 3 legs off of one pallet, so those back planks, and then you take 1 off of your second one, then that last one could be a different height and different ratio in size, and so you could have a wonky leg as far as where that surface sits on. Another thing to keep in mind when you are looking for pallets is to search for the stamp that will be on the side, and by law they're required to have these stamps. If you find a pallet that doesn't, avoid it. Now, if you see the initials HT, then your pallet is good to go. You can use it. That means that it's been heat treated for insects and insect eggs, and that there's no chemicals that have been sprayed into the wood. If instead you see another initial like MB, that means that it's been sprayed with an insecticide and that you should avoid it. Once you have your 2 pallets, you are going to begin by removing those back planks off of the back of the pallets. And there are various ways to do it. And I have used an old hatchet and a mallet. And you can use a splitting wedge. There are other tools out there as well. The important thing is that you remove those back planks in one and have the spacers still attached to them. And that's because, as I've already explained, these are going to be your legs. What you're going to do next is to cut and measure them all to 90 centimeters tall. That's 35 inches. So you want to create all the same height because you want your legs to be the same height. To cut the legs, you can use a handsaw, you can use a jigsaw, use whatever you would like. It doesn't really matter, just so long as you're making sure that you're wearing safety glasses, and at all times when you're cutting or using any kind of hand tool or mechanical tool, you have those safety glasses on as well, because in this project, had a screw come up, I've had little pieces of wood come up. You want to protect your eyes. The next step is preparing these top and lower surfaces. The pallet that you removed 3 planks off, so it's completely removed of the planks and the spacers, it's just that flat top surface. That is what you're going to use to create these surfaces here. And you need to cut them so that one piece is 2 inches wider than the other. And the reason for that is that this top surface has a 2-inch overhang in the front, and that just gives you something to lean against and something as a little bit of a lip. I mean, you could actually do 2 exactly the same size pieces, but you won't have this nice little overhang here. It might not be a big deal to you, so cut it how you would like. All of your pieces are ready for construction now. So you've got your 4 legs, they're all cut to the same length. You've got your top and your bottom surfaces. You'll begin by lying 2 of those legs flat on the ground or a work surface and attaching the lower surface to the middle spacers. The top spacers, which are flush with the top of your legs, they are the top, and that's where you're going to screw this in a little bit. So you want to screw this lower surface into those legs, into the lower spacers, and have them flush with the side of the leg. You don't want any overhang at this point. And you will attach this lower area, this lower piece, with quite long screws, and I think mine were about 3 inches long. Once you have screwed in this lower piece into 2 of those legs, put on the other 2 legs and screw them in next. And at that point, you'll also want to put the entire thing upright. And if those screws are not long enough and they're not holding it together, you will know at this point because it will fall apart. And that did happen to me, so I had to go and find some larger screws. So screw them in, get it really nicely firmly put together, and then pull the entire piece upright. And you are going to attach this top surface next. Now, I recommended giving it a 2-inch extra width compared to this lower bit, and that's because when you attach this, you want to leave a 2-inch overhang at the front of where your potting bench is. So do keep that in mind as you're screwing this into the top spacers. Now, you think that the potting bench looks finished now, but I found that mine was a bit wonky, it was a bit wobbly still. So I took some planks off of that second pallet, I removed the spacers off of them, and I screwed them into the back of my potting bench, just to give it a little bit of extra stability. And you might even find that yours needs even more, so take more wood off of that pallet, screw it in between the sides of the legs, a bit further down, anything to give it the strength to be able to stand freestanding wherever you want to place it. I have mine here in the shed wedged against a corner, so that gives it stability as well. But you want to have something that's going to be strong enough to hold plants, to hold bags of compost for you to work at, and to store gardening implements without it falling apart. So make adjustments as you need them. And after you have done that, your potting bench is finished. You've made it yourself, you've used free or inexpensive wood, and it is a fantastic surface for you to work on, to pot up plants, to sow seeds, and essentially make gardening easier. This is a really easy DIY project. I like to use pallet wood in a lot of what I make for the garden, some things for the home as well. And I have a few more projects here on Lovely Greens, including a pallet planter. I have a compost bay. That one's really simple. I have trugs. And then I have the very popular strawberry pallet planter. You can find instructions on how to make that planter here on my YouTube, on my website, but also in my book, A Woman's Garden, Grow Beautiful Plants and Make Useful Things. So if you come across pallets and they're heat treated, they're in really good nick, why not bring them home and make something useful for the garden? It really is, the sky's the limit when it comes to thinking about ways to use them. So take them home, feel creative, and feel free to use your imagination to create something useful, practical, and beautiful for the garden.